Hey everybody, we're back with Jason from the Surf Hermits. How are you, Jason? Sorry we got cut off.
It's okay. Hello, everybody.
So
Yeah, we were
where
just we're. Oh, go ahead.
no, you go right ahead.
I was just saying, in the last interview, the part that got cut off, we had been talking about how music used to be something that happened just once, and there was no way to record it. So we learned that the hard way with an interview
Yeah,
when it disappeared. Yeah.
yeah, it was a great interview, and I later found out that my one of my external drives got disconnected in the middle of the meeting.
Oh,
So
that would
even
explain it for sure.
even though it said it was still recording, it wasn't.
Ah, bummer.
So I guess you have these things when you do enough of these, everything pops up from now and then.
Well, I'll show you something that I have in my studio that relates directly to this. I'll see if I can hold it up in front of the camera here. Uh, there we go. Remember, your gear hates you and will most likely take this opportunity to sabotage your session.
Oh my god, that's crazy.
Yeah. So it's true. Just beware your gear. It does hate you.
um, so what one of there was a couple of things that I remember about the conversation that really stuck out, and
Okay.
the one of the things is how you just have this kind of calmness about you and and just peace. And one of the things I loved about your story was that you talked about being a paramedic and studying martial arts. And I in training people in martial arts. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Uh, I'll start with the paramedic part. I've been a paramedic 17 years now, I think this year. And it wasn't something that I ever aimed at as a career. It just sort of happened. Um, but it's an interesting job because obviously, you see some strange things and you participate in probably the worst moments of a person's life, repeatedly as a paramedic.
Yeah.
Um, and I've always found it pretty interesting because I've always kind of been into philosophy. Um, when I when I was very young, um, my my parents got involved in helping Tibetan refugees, kind of in the early to mid 70s. Um, they resettled a bunch of Tibetan refugees into Alberta, where I was born, and sort of settled them out into farm areas as farm labor. And somehow my mom got quite involved with them, kind of making sure that they got paid, and she would travel around with a Tibetan woman that spoke Tibetan, and eventually she got quite involved with them and got really into Tibetan Buddhism. There's kind of a Tibet has its own kind of flavor of Buddhism, so my mom got really into that. So I had a lot of that around from an early age. And in fact, we had a Tibetan Lama that lives in our house for several years when I was a kid. And when I was like 2 years old, I'd be out on the sidewalk trying to step on ants or whatever, and he would always be like moving my foot. No, 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 we don't hurt things. And so that was kind of formative in a sense for me. Um, Much later in life, interestingly, he married my wife and I in a traditional Tibetan ceremony. That's how we got married.
Awesome.
Um, but he was an interesting guy. I mean, he was like Yoda, like literally like Yoda. He kind of even looked like that. And yeah, just he like when I would he lived in Victoria, the city that I lived in when I was an adult and had moved away from home. And he would just have me over for dinner. I wouldn't say that I wasn't religious in any way. I didn't follow any of the practices, the sort of formal practices of Tibetan Buddhism or anything like that. But kind of as an old family friend, almost a strange old uncle or something like that. He would have me over for dinner, and just being there, you'd always leave just happy because he was a funny guy. Like he could barely speak English, but he loved playing pranks on the students that would come. There's these very serious Westerners that would come and study very hard, you know, but he would have like a fart machine hidden under his meditation cushion, or he had a big battery powered Uzi squirt gun that, you know, you wouldn't think of anything. You're in this beautiful almost temple setting, and then he'd pull this thing out from behind the altar and like hose somebody down, you know. So real sense of humor. So that was interesting to me, you know, and because of, you know, that exposure, um, you know, there was and so much more. Like my parents both were interested in philosophy, in alternate spiritual paths, you know. So I was reading Taoism early, reading Buddhism, Hinduism, reading lots of Alan Watts, you know, all of that stuff just kind of blowing my brain open, you know, at 11 years old. And so for me, that started a path of that kind of stuff. You know, I was always, like any kid, I was into ninjas and samurai and all that kind of stuff. And I was just lucky to sort of fall in with people that actually knew some of those things, you know. I I took a bit of karate as a kid, as a lot of people do, and ended up, when I moved to Victoria, fell in with an Aikido club, which is another martial art, and a lot of its work is based on sword work, you know, and I was always, you know, obsessed with that kind of stuff. And so as I'd meet people, I was shameless. I would just like, you know, can I study with you, or, you know, hey, can you teach me something, or you know, I'd literally just chase people down, and that just continued, you know, throughout my life. And I was lucky to run into a lot of really accomplished masters of various arts, you know. And for me, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. But, you know, I really found through martial arts this kind of way of embodying some of that philosophy, you know, that I'd read about and studied before. I mean, a lot of those things are things you can do or experience, and not in a spiritual or esoteric way, but literally just directly kind of in, you know, through training or whatever. And yeah, I studied Philippine stick fighting in LA with, you know, illegal Philippine immigrants that were living in the rough areas of town, you know. So yeah, it was got to study a whole kung fu style for about a decade with, you know, one of the only surviving masters of that style. um, yeah, just lots of weird stuff, you know, but fun, you know. And to me, it really carried over into the paramedic stuff, because I mean, martial arts in a sense, ideally, you know, I mean, really most martial arts are a game in a sense. We're training, we're modeling something. We're not out there fighting people, you know, and we shouldn't be ethically. But you know, it does concern itself with life and death and that sort of thing, which is what philosophy concerns itself with. It's life and death, you know. And so paramedicine is life and death. So for me, I feel very privileged to do work like that, because it gives me a chance to continue my own studies in a sense, you know, and to have those same, it's really the same thing as you know, standing in front of a sword fight. You know, I used to teach sword kind of publicly, and I actually had people come in for challenge matches. Like, I think what you're teaching is bullshit, you know, prove it, kind of thing.
Like the
You know,
movie.
and yeah, truly like the movies, you know, like someone would come in and it's like, you know, it wouldn't be with live blades necessarily, but it would be with, you know, sturdy wooden swords, and, you know, you could break you know, have something broken, or you could be killed by accident, you know. And you don't know what someone's going to bring, you know. Anyone can come through the door. As one of my Philippine teachers says, you know, you got to be ready to play anyone that comes in the door. So there's that moment of like, you don't know what's there yet, and you have to be open to that moment and receptive in a sense, and be able to react. And that's the same thing with paramedicine. It's like, when you walk in that room, you don't know what's really going on. You know what someone told a dispatcher is going on, but that might not be really what's going on. So you
Right.
have to be ready. Which, because we're talking about music, you know, I mean, to me, that's exactly the musical process too, when things are really flowing. It's like when you get with good players, and it's okay to not know what's coming next. That's I love that kind of improvisation, that flying by the seat of your pants, that you don't know if the whole house is going to burn down on you, but somehow you pull it out of the fire. So
Yeah.
that's why I love like Mahavishnu Orchestra and Return to Forever, and you know stuff like that, where they're really going for it, and almost not making it, but you know
That
for me, that's my favorite.
I was ruminating on that fact that you told me that when we spoke last time, when you said that same thing, and I was like,
Yeah.
I could really relate to that, because I love music that feels like it's so intense that it feels like it's going to go off the rails, but never does.
Right. Yeah. Like, um, you know, I I've been lucky enough to see a lot of music live, and like a band like Dream Theater, for example, like for me, I like complicated music. I like fusion. They, on paper, they should be like a band I love. When I saw them live, it was just, they were so polished and rehearsed. It just had nothing for me at all. It was just, they knew their parts, and they're fantastic players, like far better than anything I could pull off. But at the same time, it was just, there was no excitement, there was no fear, there was no fire in it. It was just going through the motions, in a sense, and I don't know, like for me, I really prefer something that's a bit more raw,
Yeah.
where it's like, where they're pushing beyond their limits. They're not like, okay, we've polished this perfectly. That's why I'm like, I'm a terrible bandmate in some ways, because I hate rehearsing. Like I want it to be kind of like, oh my God, are we gonna make it? But
You were talking about being called up to sit in on a few live gigs,
oh
and
yeah, yeah.
yeah, talk about that, because that's also an interesting perspective, as to what you were just saying.
Yeah, like for me, I love that. What makes you To me, what makes a good player is being exposing yourself to risk. um Going up on stage with a band, anyone playing live, is always a risk. You never know what's going to happen necessarily, and that little bit of fear, that little bit of kick in that, as a player, it always makes you better, because you make it through that and you're like, oh yeah, I can handle that. Yeah, okay, I might push myself a little further next time. And so when I was living in the city, I was a session player. I did a lot of sessions, uh, did a lot of touring, played with lots of bands, played with a few bands that were like weekly bands. We would just play at a club every week, and usually they were quite improvised. There was a soul band where I think we rehearsed once, and we sort of had half of, you know, 20 or 30 or 40 soul tunes, and then we just riff over them, and that was always so fun. But because I was known there a little bit, sometimes people would call me up and say, hey, uh, the one story I told you, hey, our drummer's high on mushrooms and he's stuck up the island and he can't get back for the gig tonight. Do you want to come play with us? And I'd never even met these guys before, never heard their music or anything. I just kind of knew that they were kind of an indie rock band, which is, from a drummer's perspective, not really rocket science. Basically, if you watch the guitar player's hands and watch when the singer's about to step up to the mic, you can see the arrangement happen, so you just have to play, and they'll count it off for you and all of that stuff. So yeah, I went and played the gig that night, and you know, and I love that feeling, and often in the city too, people come through and they need a pickup band. I remember, there's a famous jazz guy here named Hugh Fraser. He died recently, unfortunately, but he called me up and he's like, hey, my friend the sax player is doing a CD release party for his acid jazz thing. You want to come down and play it tonight? And I'm like, cool, yeah, I'll be there. But because those are all jazz guys, they assume everyone reads music. So he handed me the charts, and I'm just like, I can read music painstakingly, like I can sit there and work through it, and I'm like, oh, thanks for these charts, and I set them down by the drums, and shake hands and meet everybody, and we sit down and start playing, and they're playing the charts, and I I wasn't going to try and read it, so again, that was like an experience for me that I love, that that terror in a sense of like, oh my god, am I going to blow this whole thing out of the water or not?
Yeah.
And then you make it, and then you're like, yes. So
Totally.
for me, that's what I love about like with the Surf Hermits. I'm playing guitar in that, and I'm no guitar player by any stretch of the imagination, but so any triumph is a large triumph with guitar. It's like, wow, I played that chord successfully. So it's a neat way of rebuilding that terror again, on a
Yeah.
different instrument.
It
Yeah.
you wouldn't know it by listening to it because it sounds very natural.
Well, that's good. Like, again, I probably said it before, but I have no perspective on it. Like, to me, it sounds like it's whatever came out, and I'm kind of at the mercy of that, so I don't know if guitar players listen to that and think, what the hell is that? What is that guy doing? Yeah. But
I think a lot of and we talked about this. Players like Eddie Van Halen, who everybody looks up to, can rarely imitate. He even says you can't. If I took lessons and I could read music, I wouldn't play the way I do because
yeah,
I haven't been trained classically on guitar. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he made it all up, which is so cool, in a sense, like the best things are that. And he's still, like, people have tried to do Eddie Van Halen, but it's like there's something organic about him that is just, it's just unrepeatable somehow. It's like you can get that flavor, but no one can kind of flow like he did. And
yeah,
yeah, Van Halen, I just love Van Halen ever since I was 12 or whatever. Fair warning, I wore that cassette out probably 4 times. I bought that album so often.
yeah,
Yeah, it was I think it was the second CD I ever bought. The first one was Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet, but yeah, yeah, fair warning, it's still one of the greatest albums of all time for me,
yeah.
for
Me
sure.
too. That's my favorite. It's got to be in my top 5, but definitely my favorite Van Halen album.
Yeah. Have you, by the way, have you heard A Different Kind of Truth, that sort of last album they did with David Lee Roth?
I have it, but I gotta say I wasn't impressed with Dave anymore.
Yeah, Dave doesn't quite have the vocals he did, but for me, like the tunes, like a lot of that was kind of Fair Warning era stuff that they
Yes,
resurrected off of the old tapes.
yeah,
And like I would still stand that record up with any of the other David Lee Roth albums, like on the vinyl shelf. Those are the
yeah,
records I have, it's like,
yeah.
yeah.
Now, uh, Eddie and his son plays bass, Wolfy, and
Yep.
if there's some songs where you could hear them tapping together, and
Yeah.
that was pretty impressive.
Oh, I mean, to me, like, I really think that's a kick-ass Van Halen album, actually. I love listening to that. Some of the riffs and things they do between the guitar and bass are just insanity. I was a big fan of Michael Anthony. It's not an either or thing for me, but yeah, I thought Wolfie kicked ass on that. And his new record sounds really good too.
I haven't
I
heard
don't
it
know
yet, but
if you've heard it.
I haven't heard it, but I heard he played his dad's strat what did he call it?
Like the Frankenstein or
The
whatever. Yeah.
Frankenstein one, Frankenstrat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
heard he played that,
He
right?
he plays everything on the record, like drums, bass, guitar, does all the vocals. It's like it's 100% him on the album, which is cool.
I wonder if he recorded it at 5150.
He did. Yeah. It was all
Oh,
at 5150.
that's kind of sad too. Don't you think?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
kind
for sure.
whenever I think about it, I
That
get
was,
so sad.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was yeah, Eddie was my favorite. I don't know if well, I don't have that strap on my, usually the strap on my telly has an Eddie Van Halen button on it. And in fact, oh, there it is. Sorry. On the Surf Hermits exclusively use EVH. Whoops, sorry if I get the
Ah,
Eddie Van
nice.
Halen picks.
Ah, very cool.
Yeah, that is the pick on the Surf Hermits record exclusively, right there.
Nice.
Yeah, the Van Halen nerd show here.
Oh, totally, totally.
Yeah.
I also want to nerd out a little bit to Public Enemy, which we talked about
Yeah.
how important not only revolutionized hip hop, I think, when I first saw that video I was telling you about, and you hear the piano just come in, it was just
Yeah, Black Steel and the Hour of Chaos. That's right. Off
yeah,
of It Takes a Nation of Millions. Yeah.
yeah. Like when I first heard that, and my mom walked in the room, she's like, "What are you listening to?" I said, "I don't know. I don't look at these guys." and
Yeah.
and you got to see them.
Yeah, I've seen them 3 times. I saw them with Anthrax. I saw them with U2, and I saw them kind of just on their own as well. And I met Flavor Flav in a music store in Vancouver, British Columbia, and yeah, I Public Enemy was so formative for me. And I was thinking about this after we talked about it. It's like I can't even remember actually how I discovered them necessarily. It's weird. Like I think before that I was listening to like Run DMC and the Beastie Boys. That's probably was it
Yeah,
actually. And then
it seems a nice logical step.
yeah, and I was yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a gateway rap
Yeah.
or whatever. But yeah, I mean, for me, I just really they literally radicalized me in a way, you know, like I was fascinated with Black culture and the kind of that the politics of Black culture ever after. I mean, still to this day, you know, I mean, a month ago I read the Malcolm X autobiography again. You know, have read Black Power and you know Soul on Ice and uh, all the classic stuff. When I was studying Eskrima in LA, uh, I had to take the train up uh, through Compton and you know all those places you hear about on NWA albums and you know all of that and that was just fascinating for me. It was like I loved it, you know, and it was interesting. I didn't feel weirdly out of place, so I probably looked out of place. But like I was the only guy on the train reading the Nation of Islam newspaper. You know, I was like, oh, this is wow, you know. And in fact, there was I don't know if I told you this one last time, but um, I was sitting on the train because it was about a 2-hour ride, and these kids walked by and they're like they had like the stereo or the Bluetooth speaker or something, and it was like bumping some kind of hip hop stuff. And this kind of older Black gentleman sitting behind me, he's like, you know, he kind of made some disapproving noises, you know, and it's like music these days, it ain't what it used to be, you know. And I couldn't help myself. I just turned around. I'm like, but you know, think of where this came from, you know, like, and like went into this like, you know, amateur musicology of like, you know, like rap is not, it's not that it's not anti-musical, it's just a different musical tradition. It's like African drumming tradition and you know all these other things. It really is something special, you know, of its own. It shouldn't be compared to like Luther Vandross or something like that. It's yeah, it's something of its own. And Public Enemy was so revolutionary, especially in those early albums, with the Bomb Squad, Eric Sadler and those guys producing that
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
I mean, their stated goal is to make anti-music. You know, they wanted stuff that didn't have bass lines in it because they didn't want to set a tonality for it necessarily, you know, and just that density of samples and yeah, and the kind of political anger in it. It just really had an energy that still hits me hard. You know, I love it. I mean, it's like to me, it's almost like listening to old Slayer or something like that. It has that kind of
Yeah.
drive in it that's like amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
love Public Enemy.
I totally when Public Enemy came out a couple years later they had NWA, and that like twisted things in even a more raw approach, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Like for me, like if it was a rap album between like '89 and '92, I bet I could probably recite most of the lyrics out of my head for it. So like NWA, Ghetto Boys, Compton's Most Wanted, Public Enemy, you know, like on and on and on. I Ice-T, you know, Ice
oh
Cube,
yeah.
you know, all of that stuff. I just ate that stuff up for a lot of years. a lot of singing along with that in the car.
Ice-T has a really good life story. if you've ever
Oh
heard
my
him
God,
talk
yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, being in the
Yeah, neat
military
guy.
and coming home and pimping, and it's just
Yeah.
an extraordinary
Yeah,
life.
amazing. Amazing. I mean, a lot of those guys did really, another great act is Gangstar. Like, I just
Yeah,
love Gangstar. DJ Premier, the latest Public Enemy record, actually, DJ Premier from Gangstar produced one of the tracks, which I was just like, oh, this is like, it all comes together, baby. But sometimes that can go bad. I remember when Van Halen and Sammy Hagar combined, at
yeah.
that point, I think I was about 13 years old, and my two favorite bands were Sammy Hagar's solo stuff and Van Halen. And I was like, this is a dream come true. They're getting together, and it just never worked out as I had hoped.
Yeah, me.
Yeah.
I think I liked 5150, but what
Yeah.
past that, I was kind of not. It's not that I disliked them. I just think there
No,
wasn't the old raw Van Halen.
it didn't have that dark magic of Fair Warning or whatever. I saw them on another musical transitional moment for me is I saw them on the Monsters of Rock tour, probably like 88 or something like that. Maybe it was like OU 812. That was that record, but
Yeah,
it was a gig with, it was Van Halen, the Scorpions, Metallica, Dokken, and a band called Kingdom Come, which were kind of like a Led Zeppelin ripoff
I
band.
remember them.
And, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
In fact, my friend and I, a good friend that I grew up playing music with, he's a great guitar player, Mark Nickel. But he was wearing a Led Zeppelin shirt, and where we saw them was in Spokane, Washington. And there's like one good hotel in town. So if you stay at that hotel, all the bands that are playing stay there too. So you'll like walk past them in the lobby and see them in the elevator. So we're in the elevator, and the guy from Kingdom Come comes in, and he's like, "Oh, what shirt you got there?" It's like, "Oh." He opens up his thing and it's Led Zeppelin. He's like, "Oh, never heard of him." we just ripped him off completely. But yeah, that gig, that switched me into Metallica. Like, I went for Van Halen
Oh
and I
yeah.
left like a Metallica maniac
Oh,
for
you
the whole.
did?
Yeah. Like seeing them live, like I had kind of been listening to Anthrax and been sort of introduced to things, but it was like, oh my God, like those
Yeah,
guys are tight. It's kind of complicated.
yeah.
Yeah, it was,
That was
enjoyed that.
that was my transition. I was a huge Van Halen fan. I was addicted to everything they did. And then I heard Master of Puppets
Mm.
in 86, and that was the year 5150 came out. So I was kind of like more on the I want to listen to heavier stuff. So I kind of went like in that direction too, with like the technical
Yeah.
musicianship. It was uh I think that I modeled my playing more after James Hetfield than I would Eddie, because
Yeah.
I like percussive playing.
Yeah. And as a drummer, it was the same for me. It's like I would play along in my room to Van Halen, and then it was like, okay, Master of Puppets,
Yeah,
like as
yeah.
a drummer, that was like really exciting to do, and it's like when double kick was sort of starting to happen a little bit, in that kind of music. And yeah, it was that progression, it was kind of like Anthrax and then Metallica and then Slayer and then, kind of on and on from there for me, for sure.
Awesome. I want to
Yeah.
talk a little bit about some of the other bands you do. We didn't get to those last time, and I know I wanted to talk to you about them. So can you
Sure.
just
Yeah.
start chronologically, and kind of just walk through the things you've done and the style of music?
Yeah. Okay. Well, now when I'll start with my dad actually. My dad, he was drafted and sent to Vietnam, and while he was in Vietnam, I mean, the army is a lot of boredom too, so someone had sent him a guitar, and he and some of the pilots, he was in a helicopter air ambulance company, and they had what they called the Spit and Whittle Club. So they would sit around and play. One guy was a banjo player, and my dad sort of started picking up guitar, And so all of my life he's played guitar, and he was also very early in on kind of the home recording thing, like some of the very first Tascam to cassette 4-tracks. We still have the machines here. Uh, he started recording his own songs. So through his life, he's recorded, there's a rack of cassettes over here on the wall that were the 4-tracks. And I mean, he's probably written and recorded 400 to 500 songs, I would say,
Wow.
in his lifetime so far. He just continues. Like he turned 80 this year, and he's still kicking it hard. Like that workstation behind me there on that side. Sorry, camera's not mirrored. He works there, and so like he just continues to do that. And so my first studio playing experiences were playing into one mic, putting one mic in front of the kit on a chair and playing to dad's tunes. So uh, I played on dozens of songs, before I was even a teenager probably. And so that really started me playing and understanding playing to music, and all of that kind of thing. And then it started also a fascination with the technology and techniques of recording as well. So when I went off to university, I always had a cassette 4-track, and I was always working on various things. And you know when I was there, when I went to university, uh, meeting musicians and meeting people, one of the guys at the music store, a guy named Bert Goulet, uh, really wonderful guy, just a very warm guy, really got along with him well. And we ended up opening a commercial recording studio together because he had a recording studio. Um, some of the first bands I was uh, in that in that city, uh, yeah, I started a band with, I just answered an ad at the university. It's like drummer wanted, and so I just said, yeah, hey, I'm a drummer, and it was kind of alternative rock. Female singer, named Kim Linekin. She ended up touring as a background singer for Sarah McLachlan for a
Oh,
while, later on. And so we did a couple, little albums there. Joined another band called Mustard Punt, a weird band. They were maniacs. Like that was, I learned about what touring was from those guys and why you needed a designated driver on the tour. That was me. These guys were insane. Like they would like, if there was drugs or alcohol available, they would do it until they were unconscious and wake up and start again. And that would be like a 3-week tour,
oh my God.
and I'd be driving, and yeah, that the stories out of that tour are just insanity. I won't extend this interview into 3 hours talking about that one, but yeah. So and then just did a lot of session work, played with lots of different people. Uh, Met some lifelong collaborators in that process. A good friend of mine, Aram Massey. We've done endless things together. We live in kind of different cities at the moment, but still we meet every couple months and work on things. So I don't know if you listen to any of the stuff, other stuff that I sent you at all, but he's kind of the other creative mind behind that Fusion project, and kind of an electronic project we've done. And we're always going off on tangents, interesting tangents. But uh, one of the things, right when the other interview cut off there, we were just talking about how I started playing guitar and that band process. It was from a martial arts school where we all there was a lot of musicians there. We said, let's start a band, but we're going to have a band where we don't play instruments we know how to play. So
Yeah.
I got guitar, and that's that's sort of how I started on guitar more seriously. I mean, my dad had showed me chords, and I kind of could play some bar chords, but I never really picked it up. I'd pick up a guitar once every 5 years or something like that. But in that process, we got together, came to the studio one night, and within 2 hours we had I think 10-song album fully recorded. Like, and the songs had been written, performed, and recorded all within 2 hours. Everything. And so we were like, wow, that was fun. Let's do it again. So the next night we did a whole other album. Again, just wrote it right on the spot, and we ended up doing 10 albums with that band, which they got better as they went along. Obviously, they were pretty terrible at first, but the neat thing for that band for me was, you know, it was kind of a joke. The lyrics are super dirty. You know, it was just, you know, it seemed like a laugh kind of thing. But looking back on it, I'm like, that was an interesting creative process, for me, and very liberating in a sense, because, um, I mean, we all know those musicians that, you know, they write some tunes and they're never satisfied with them, and they re-record them, and they're constantly trying to polish it. And, you know, if they get a tune recorded, it's been made so perfect that there's no life left in it or anything like that. And this particular band, called the Bangkok Motorcycle Gang, there was no standards at all. If we made it to the end of the tune, that was the take. So all of the albums are basically first takes, you know, maybe a second take if we totally train wrecked it. But, you know, so no standards applied to it at all, which of course can make for terrible music, you know, of course. But, uh, it can make for some really interesting and, satisfying surprises, actually. You know, like you listen to some of the tunes and you're like, wow, that came out really good. You know, considering that I scribbled the lyrics out, the singer, I handed it to the singer, and then we counted off something, and that was it. You know, like that. So real magic can come out of that too, which, is amazing to me. You know, and then so just continue the chronology. So, uh, fusion band, that's kind of an ongoing project. I'm working on kind of I call it a doom project, but it's more kind of like doom and thrash kind of put together somehow. Again, I never know what these genres are, but I just know what I want to hear. So that's that one is almost complete. Just working with a really good guitar player friend of mine called Rod Keen. He's uh, he's a longtime collaborator as well, and, with him and with Aram, who I mentioned as well, we have a band where we improvise live to film.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
so yeah, so there'll be a movie, and it's a film that we haven't seen before. That's always part of it, you know. Um,
So
so
you do
we'll
this
have a movie
live?
live. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The first time we did it live, we did it at a, experimental music festival, quite a big experimental music festival, and, just set up a screen, darken the whole room. We're set up kind of interspersed amongst the audience, you know, so people are sitting around us and in front of us and behind us, and so we're all looking up and watching the movie, and, just, you know, working the moods of the movie basically. And, we actually recorded a few sessions of that, and so there's a band camp for that and all that kind of thing.
What's that called?
But, that's called the Orchestral Key Harmonic Wudang Prananastic Brahmanauts. Orchestral.bandcamp.com.
Awesome.
But, yeah, that's a really fun project too, because again, you really have no idea what's happening, and the instrumentation's interesting in that because it's, I play drums. Rod is on guitar, and he has quite an extensive pedal board, and he's like a death metal guy, so he has like an eight-string guitar, so it can get some really sounds that are out of the range of normal guitar sounds. And then Aram plays Fender Rhodes and baritone sax, so that's the whole, you know, it makes for an interesting set of sounds to explore for sure.
That sounds
But
really
yeah, and then
interesting.
yeah, just, you know, do what grabs you. And right now, surf is what has grabbed me recently. You know, like I said before, this was an attempt to sort of have a project that I didn't have to worry about getting other people's stuff done on it. You know, it's just something that I could do myself. And I've always really loved surf music. To me, I sort of came to it almost. I was thinking about that too. Like, where did that come from? And I think in a lot of ways through the Dead Kennedys, actually,
Yeah, yeah.
because East Bay Ray has that kind of surfy sound all the time, and I've always loved
Yeah.
that. You know, and in that punk rock band, I was always trying to like cop his sound all the time. Like I had an echo pedal, you know, and I would really go for that vibe, you know, and I think the energy of surf, you know, we were talking about how Public Enemy has a certain energy to it. Surf music for me has a certain energy to it. You know, there's a momentum, there's kind of a drive to it, because it's action music in a sense. You know, you're surfing, you're like, you're gonna get crunched by that wave any moment, you know? So it's like, there's tension there and there's kind of excitement and action and drive, you know? So that's really, for me, what I love about hearing surf music, but that's what I love about making it too, you know, because I really, for me, I love that momentum in music, that kind of, you know, when it's really going somewhere.
What are some of uh what are some of the bands that might have gotten you into surf music?
Well, like I said, Dead Kennedys for sure. Um, there was a band from Vancouver called the Falcons, and they were around probably in the '90s. And I had a cassette of theirs, and actually, I think you can find them on like iTunes and Spotify now, actually. But they were kind of almost more desert music, kind of westerny, um, but with that surfy kind of sound, you know. And I listened to them just so much. That was another cassette I pretty much wore out. Um, and Shadowy Men from a Shadowy Planet
Oh
were
yes,
kind of yeah, we're kind of that soundish kind of thing.
yeah,
And there a lot of indie stuff from the '90s really drew from that, you know. Like there was
the
I worked
Pixies.
at the Pixies, yeah. The I worked at the university radio station, and I did the rap show, you know. But there were so many um, indie bands and like cool shows that people would do. There's a guy that had the punk and blues show, and so it was either punk rock or like Mississippi Fred McDowell, you know. And it would just be that, you know. And there was a surf show that had other stuff too. It was kind of surf and punk kind of stuff. And like I found like the audiences of those, at least among, you know, that sort of age range, really dug it. You know, they didn't know the '60s surf traditions or anything like that. They just knew what they heard filtered, you know, through the punk movement or whatever. Because again, I think the energy was similar. You know, like if you put a rock and surf band in front of, you know, on a stage with a punk band, the audience is going to be like, yeah, I can relate to that. You know,
Yeah, totally.
yeah.
There's a
And I
lot
just
of
love instrumental music.
I love instrumental music too. Um, speaking to what you just said, a lot of times in Philadelphia there'd be mixed bills when I was in college. The Reverend Horton Heat,
Yeah, yeah. Saw them
uh,
a few times. Yeah.
a band that was kind of like '60s rock kind of surf called Grieving Eucalyptus. They were local, and then you'd have like a band like Face to Face show up, and
Yeah.
like you said, you could put them all together, and it didn't seem out of place for some reason.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, while the sound might be slightly different, or the, you know, the lyrical content or whatever, it's like the sort of that essential energy of it is kind of the same in some ways. You know,
Yeah,
it's
totally.
it's it's action it's action music. You know, it's like, yeah. And I've always loved that. You know, and again for me, surf is cool because it's instrumental, and I've always loved instrumental music because it's cinematic for me. You know, um, and you know, something like to like have you ever watched a Warren Miller ski movie? Like
No.
Warren Miller, probably in the '80s, probably the '80s, he put out these ski movies, you know, with instrumental soundtracks behind them. And that's where like I first heard Joe Satriani. That's where I
Oh
heard
yeah, yeah,
Stu Ham. Yeah. Like all of that sort of guitar based instrumental music. Like when I think about it, I'm like, this really came from surf in a certain way, you know. Like Satriani is like
yeah,
an instrumental guitar guy with a kind of California vibe, you know. It's like, how different is he from Dick Dale, really? You know,
yeah,
like in some ways very different, but in some ways not that different, you know, in essential principle.
yeah.
And I was thinking about like my record, the Surf Hermits record, and I'm like, I'm a crappy guitar player, but really what I'm trying to do is make Satriani records, you know, because like I love how he can change a chord, how his melodies, you know, are
Yeah,
emotional in a certain way, you know. And again, there's that sort of cinematic aspect to it that is so compelling to me, you
yeah.
know. Another great instrumental record, Jeff Beck's Blow by Blow. like that's, I don't know
Yeah.
if you've heard that one, but
Yeah. Yeah.
1975. Oh, so good. And so much of that affects how I record music. You know, that record actually, how that's played. If I record a Fender Rhodes, it's getting the auto pan on it, just like Max Middleton has on that record. Like it just doesn't matter. It's got to sound like that. But
Flying in a Blue Dream is
oh,
a big album for me. And then once I heard all the people that Satriani had taught some things, like
Kirk Hammett.
Kirk
Yeah,
Hammett, in fact,
yeah.
and a bunch of other people, I was like, well, there's got to be something to this guy. And then when I heard Surfing with the Alien was the first one I heard, and
Yeah.
it's just mind blowing. I can't even like put a genre on it.
Yeah, and that's what's so neat about it, because it's like, it is hard to put a genre on it. It's something bigger than a genre to me, you know, like, and I just say that because I love that music. I mean, some people hate that music, but uh yeah, I saw him on the Flying in a Blue Dream tour, um with Eric Johnson opening up on that
Yeah,
tour,
I can see that.
which was, yeah, which was great. That was with Stu Ham, was in the band then, you know,
In
and
Joe's band.
in Joe's band, yeah, and
Yeah,
Jonathan Mover
yeah,
was the drummer, and it was just a trio. And like Stu Ham is like playing the keyboard parts, you know, of, he's tapping the keyboard parts and playing the bass line while Joe's ripping the, you know, like it's just so amazing, you know. Just love that stuff. Love that stuff. And to me, that's a huge inspiration for me as a, you know, as what I'm doing now with the Surf Hermits. You know, I really like, yeah, how chords can change a little bit, you know, and take you a little bit unexpected, or change the mood a little bit. I'm not a really theory guy, but you know, sometimes that switch from major to minor, or whatever, you know, one of the latest tunes I'm working on, the second album, you know, it's like it turned into a whole tone thing. I'm just like, wow, you know, I don't even know what whole tones are really, but here we are, you know, let's try and make it work, you know. I really enjoy that process of discovery, you know, where it's like, wow, I hear something and it's like, you know, because I've listened to so much crazy music with incredible players. It's like my brain wants those things, but I can't necessarily do them. But what's so fun about it is trying to figure out how to do it now. You know, it's like, oh,
yeah.
okay, it's got to be this change. You know, I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what key I'm in. I don't know what the scale is, but here we go. You know, so like I've always been an ear player, so
Yeah,
yeah,
me
it's going to
too.
be a nightmare when I do this live. It's going to be, I'm going to have to like literally learn it verbatim over again or something,
So
because the
you,
process of this,
oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say you have a whole album in the can right now.
Yeah, I've got the second album is like 90% done probably. I wanted to, like, Hang Zen is 8 tunes. Like I thought, I didn't really look at the times of them, you know. I just thought 8 tunes is like an old LP, you know.
Yeah,
That's often it would be 8 to 10. And then I realized it's like, whoa, it's like actually 30 minutes maybe, you know. It's barely beyond an EP really in
yeah,
terms of overall length. So I thought, okay, I won't cheat myself and the few people that enjoy listening to it by making it so short next time. I'll see if I can go for 11 or 12 tunes, but I'm at about 9 completed now. So
great.
yeah.
Do you think what you set out to accomplish when you did the first Surf Hermits, that you achieved what you wanted to accomplish? Because it's a really good sounding record.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I achieved more than I thought I could actually. You know, like there's lots of things that I think could be way better on it. And interestingly, because like the other thing about this is I'm kind of learning how to play guitar as it happens, you know. So um I can hear that progression in the first record even, you know, like it's not in the order that I wrote the tunes obviously, but I know what that order, that original order of writing the tunes is, and I can hear my playing change over that time. And for me, the second record probably to the outside listener, it's probably not that different, but the second record is a major evolution for me in terms of how I feel like I'm playing, just because, you know, I haven't spent a massive amount of time on these albums. Like, I've tried to keep this creative drive pushing me ahead so I can't drop off and like realize 6 months later, oh my God, you know, I've only done 6 tunes or whatever. I want to push through and make myself create, you know. Neil Gaiman, the writer, he has this sort of thing. It's like, you know, the only thing is not to quit, and the only thing is to make time for yourself every time you can. I can't really do it every day, but you know, he's like, every day write for a certain amount of time, even if it's crap. It's training in a sense, you know.
Yeah.
And you become productive in spite of yourself, you know, through that process. And so I've really tried to follow that this time around, you know. And so I realized, like, I probably did the first Surf Hermits record over maybe 4 to 6 weeks, basically on weekends.
Wow.
You know, and so I was putting in maybe, I don't know, 5 to 6 hours of guitar playing, a couple of times a week, you know. So I mean, that's far and above, that's more than I'd ever done previously, all put together probably. And you know, so now most of the way through the second album, you know, I've probably played a couple of 100 hours of guitar fairly intensively, just in the last couple of months, you know. So I'm finding now, like, my biggest frustration with that as a new instrument, because with drums, it's like, I've played it long enough. If I hear something, I can just do it. I don't have to think about it. I just sort of throw my hands out there and it happens or whatever, right? But guitar, it's not like that. And I expect it to be, you know. Like, I want it to be, so I just put my hands somewhere and it's the right thing, and you know, it just happens. And you know, it's certainly, I'm a long way from being able to express myself spontaneously on guitar, but I'm finding now that I can start to hear where to go, you know. Like, if I hear something, I can move there and generally hit it maybe 50% of the time, which is
Well,
I mean, the process would be laughable for a real guitar player, because I just sit there and I grind for like 3 to 4 hours for one of those melody parts, you know, and find bits of it and learn the whole thing. I end up playing the whole thing, but it's like, I learn it in these pieces as I accidentally stumble across something that sounds good. You know, I know that if I knew more, I could do it more efficiently, but it is what it is, for sure.
It sounds like you have to at least enjoy playing the guitar to put as much time
Oh yeah.
into it. It's not easy, although there are a lot of guitar players. But you personally, you make the time to learn it and understand it. And to me, from the outside, it seems like you've accomplished a lot learning an instrument doing this band.
Yeah, like, it's been like, and even it's all sort of a piece, you know. It's like, like, in the process of writing the music, then you come across things, oh, it needs to change here, you know, and then it's like, what are those chords? So I've got to figure that out. And then it's like, you know, I hear how the melody should sort of happen over that, or sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm like, I've got an entire bed track with chord changes and everything, and it's like, I have no idea what that melody is yet, you know. And so I'll just sit there and I'll noodle and I'll mess around, and I'll, you know, sometimes I'll go on YouTube and like find like Andy Timmons. Have you ever seen that guy at all?
No.
He was like a glam rock player in the 90s, but he's like a session guy. He's played with Simon Phillips and done some kind of interesting fusion albums. And sometimes I'll just go on YouTube and find someone cool, like Satriani, you know. It's like, what does he have to say? And I'll try and learn one thing from that, you know. But Andy Timmons I was watching a thing with him, and he's like, oh yeah, you know, often I don't worry about the scale. I'll actually slide up and down the neck, you know, and I'll just find those intervals on a single string. And I'm like, my God, that's what I've been doing the whole time, because I suck. But it's legit, you know. So, and it's like, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but at the same time, it's like, in a way that gave me permission to go harder on some of the things that I had just been doing accidentally because my technique is absent. You
That's
know what I mean?
excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
Like go hard with what comes naturally to you.
Yeah, like like that punk rock band I was saying where we just wrote the tunes on the spot and recorded. Like to me, it was very formative in a sense because it's okay to see what comes out, you know, and it's okay to let what comes out by itself come out. And you can always refine that if you want, but I think most musicians have a really harsh self-editing process, you know, and they think it's for a good reason, but really it's like who cares, you know? It's like how many people are really gonna hear this, you know? When I make these records, it's like when I made the first Hermits album, that was 100% for me, you know. I knew I'd throw it out on Facebook or something, and I'd have friends that liked it or whatever, and you know, everyone would be polite and say, "Oh, great album" or whatever, you know. To me, I don't take any of that terribly seriously. I mean, I love to hear it from people like you that I know, you know, I know you know what you're talking about, you know, and it's, you know, we don't have a long relationship as friends where you feel like you have to say that to me, you know, like I like for me, I'm always interested in what the real feedback is. You know, if someone says to me, actually that sounds terrible, you know, I don't take that personally. I'm like, okay, but how? You know, tell me, you know, like what's
Yeah.
terrible about it? You know, oh, the guitar playing sounds terrible because, and then I'm like, sweet, you know, now I know what to go work on, you know. But at the same time, it's like I just make it for myself. So if it's good enough for me, then it's good enough. And again, if I get surprised in the process, if what it comes out is like interesting to me because I couldn't have predicted it, that's what I'm really shooting for in a sense. And in order to get that, you have to just let things kind of fall out of you in a sense, you know, and that's how I try to approach it. So, you know, I just like a lot of the tunes on the second album or even on the first one too. It's like I'd be like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to work on I'm going to write something. And I'd sit down and I'd get something like 3/4 of the way done. I'm like, this sucks. This is terrible. You know, like, what am I going to do with this? You know, this is just, I'm just forcing it, you know? And then I'd be like, no, you know, this is what came out. Let's take it to the end, you know? And then once it gets done, it's like, wow, I really like that for myself. You know, I wouldn't be, I wouldn't prevail to say that it's great. I don't know. But for me, it's like, wow, I like that. That's surprisingly good for what I thought it was going to be. So we'll stick that in the can too, you know? And so I've been lucky that way that there's been no throwaway tunes yet. Like Hang Zen, all 8 tunes were the 8 tunes that I wrote for that. There was not like 12 tunes and 4 of them sucked. Let's pick the best ones. This was just like write, record. That's enough for an album. Okay, in the can, you know. And then the second album's been the same way too.
Awesome. One thing I wanted to ask you that I didn't get to ask you before we sign off is one thing that really interests me is, and I've recorded a lot, but I don't know the nuts and bolts of it. I can't. I'm a terrible mixer. I used to go to our mixing sessions and I just be like, I don't get it. I'm not hearing what you're hearing. And
Yeah.
so when you go in one day and you track a few songs, you come back the next day, your guitar sounds completely different. How do you maintain, and this is a general question I could have asked anybody, but you as a professional, what is the trick to doing that?
Well, from a mixing point of view, like actually, it's interesting that you bring that up because I actually struggled a bit with this process that we're going to talk about on the first Surf Hermits record because, like, mixing, you have to like you have to be able to trust that what you hear will translate to other things, right?
Yeah,
So if you set up a studio, and if you hear a tune and you record a song and you mix it, you want to be able to take it into the car and still have it sound good and sound good on
yeah,
earbuds and sound good on your buddy's like $10,000 stereo or whatever, or through a PA system or something. And so, you know, the mixing process is always this process of mixing it, taking it around, listening, you know, until eventually you trust your speakers. and weirdly, it's like the speakers I have are good, but I don't know that I've gotten to a trust point of them point with them yet, you know? So it's like this album went through a lot of iterations where I mixed it and I would listen to it for, you know, a couple weeks, and then I would listen to it through something else and I'd be like, oh my God, that sounds, you know, the
Yeah.
that melody guitar is like really, really loud or whatever, you know, and so I'd go back and I went back a bunch of times in this process actually. And then when it was finally like Sharwaji signing it, oh my God, you know, I got to give a master to them. Oh, you know, this is serious. You know, I've got to actually get something, you know, it's going on a physical thing. So I've got to actually deliver the final thing, because even the Bandcamp, like the first probably 10 people that bought it, I sent them a message. I was like, you know, if you downloaded this, download it again because it's all different now. Like I actually had remixed it, you know. So yeah, like mastering it and mixing it was tough for me that way, just because again, you almost need other minds in on it, you know, like mixing is so psychological. And like you say, like it'll sound totally different the next day, or because you were worried about what the kick drum sounds like, you know, you didn't realize the bass is like way too loud, or vice versa or whatever. So yeah, I mean, there's tricks as you mix. Like one thing is to mix it very low volume, like almost where it's inaudible. And then when you listen to it that way, you can hear what's loud and what's missing. You know, like if you can hear everything at that level, then you're getting there in a way. So there's lots of little tricks to it. But yeah, it's hard. And there is a point where you just like, I can't remember who said it, but great art is never finished. It's only abandoned.
George
So
Lucas.
like George, yeah. So I take that, you know, I wouldn't call what I do great art necessarily, but I would say that I do abandon it at some point. You know, you kind of have to. Like that's what I felt, because as this was being released, I was already into the second record, and you know, like the playing is better. Um, you know, the process is being refined. You know, and it's like I can't obsess about what's wrong with the first record for me. You know, it's satisfactory, you know, and I can find warts in it, but it doesn't matter. That moment is past and it's there, you know, and so on to the next thing. And I'm absolutely happy with the first record. I think it really did achieve what I wanted to achieve. You
Awesome.
know, there's things I could have done better, but there's a lot that I could have done worse. So, you know, so yeah, I'm happy with that in that regard. Absolutely.
That is such a great story. I don't know if I said it in the other interview. I know I said it to you before, but congratulations on Sharawaji.
Yeah, thanks.
That's a very huge deal. I'm sure you know.
Yeah, it weirdly I don't, in a funny way, you know, like because like I finished that record and I was like, you know, I always just do stuff for myself. I should throw this at a couple of labels, you know, and it, you know, they were interested right away, and I thought, oh, cool, you know, and I had seen their name around a lot when I was looking at surf music and looking for surf labels, you know, and but yeah, so I kind of only realized after the fact,
Yeah.
you know, like I'd really signed with them already. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, you know, and it's like, oh, this is actually pretty cool,
Yeah.
you know, and again, it's been a great experience. You know, Michael's been great, and it's been an education for me. You know, there's a whole other aspect of work involved in an album that as a band, a lot of bands anyway. I mean, there's some very hardworking bands, but at least me, I've always been kind of lazy. It's like you think you do the record, someone else can sell it. I don't care, you know. But I realized, you know, if Sharawaji is going to push the trust in me, you know, to put my music out with their name on it, then I'm gonna burn some calories for them, you know, to try and keep the record visible for people, and do some of that social media stuff that really before I would have thought, oh God, you know,
I know. I know what you
I'm
mean.
not a salesman. You know, like, and, but it's a reality of it. And to me, again, you know, I feel like it's, you know, it's my duty to whatever label I'm on, but you know, that's Sharawaji at the moment, to do my best for them as well, to try and sell some albums for them,
Yeah,
but
it'd be great. Is your new album gonna be on CD or vinyl or
it
both?
is. Sharawaji has had some delays with vinyl production because of shipping issues, because of COVID.
Yeah,
Some of the things that are coming out, I think Underwater Bosses just came out on a super cool, like red
yeah.
translucent vinyl. And I think that actually went in last year sometime to be pressed, as far as I'm aware.
Wow.
Um, Someone can tell me if I'm wrong there, but there's been some big delays for everybody. But so at this point, it's digital and CD. Vinyl is going to come down the road a little ways. That's kind of the plan.
I think we talked about that, kind of like the sales from the CD would help finance the pressing of the vinyl.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, from a business perspective, like, again, I don't know the specifics, how they think of it, but if I was running a label, you know, it would, how well is that CD going to sell? Are we selling any records? Are we gonna do a vinyl run, which has a cost, a
yeah,
significant cost? Are we going to do that if none of them are going to sell? It makes sense, that
right.
you might sort of test the waters, so to speak, especially on something totally brand new like Surf Hermits. It's I'm sure it's something that its momentum will pick up over time, over albums. So
Yeah.
it's been great. We were almost at 1,500 listens on Bandcamp,
Oh
which is
wow.
cool. I never thought that many people would be checking it out. So yeah, I'm not going to be running a Van Halen tour or having my own jet plane yet, I don't think, but certainly, a lot of people have listened to it, and I really appreciate that. It's very cool. It's hit some Japanese radio stations, some Mexican radio stations, Brazilian, US obviously.
All the right
Um,
places.
yeah, it's been great, and I felt very fortunate that people have liked it, because it is, I think it's kind of weird. You know what I mean? Like, when I listen to other surf bands, I'm like, man, these guys are cool. What I write is kind of weird, but people listen to it, which
It's
is gratifying.
it's hard to be objective when it's something you've done, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Uh,
How would you describe it? Is it weird?
no, no, it seems like a classic surf album. There's
Does it?
nothing.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good to know.
like when I heard it, I was just kind of like, oh, who are these guys? And I started looking you up. I looked at your Bandcamp. I looked at your Facebook. I looked, or I'm sorry, Instagram. And as soon as I heard some of your music, I immediately wanted to talk to you. So, and
Awesome.
and I talked to a lot of bands, but I only talked to the bands I checked out first that I like their music.
Right.
So
Well, thanks for that. Yeah.
I still have a lot to learn and a lot of bands to get to, which I will. But there's just so many, and I
Oh, yeah.
I was talking to the guys from Shaking Cats Radio, and the guy said, which was profound and but simple. He said there are no crappy surf bands. They're just aren't.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very simple way of putting it. Is like, if you like the music, you like the music. That's just how it is.
Yeah,
And
I mean, because it's always been rawish music, it's cool that way.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think people that play surf music do it to express themselves in the same way as other people, as a community. Like, everybody together is trying to express the same thing from inside. And I think that's why what he said resonated so well with me. It's just because, yeah, people might do it slightly different from each other, but I could definitely get a sense of people all are of the same mind when it comes to surf music.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and it's the community is kind of neat. Like, as I get into this process, I'm discovering more about it, and sort of meeting people and following them on Instagram and vice versa, and having conversations, you know, I'm always fascinated with the collaborations that happen, and you know, like I I now I realize it's like, man, I want to collaborate with someone cool now, you know,
Yeah,
and
totally.
see what happens. You know, like there's been some cool, like I don't know who released it, but it's like the terror surfs and like alien surfers or something like that on each on one side of a 45. Like, what a great
Uh-huh.
concept. I love
Yeah,
that.
awesome.
Yeah.
There's just so much interesting things um that you could do with surf music. You have the exotica, the tiki, the Latin America, South America incorporates their traditional music in with it,
Mhm.
and it's just fantastic. I've never met a genre. I've never heard a genre that can have so many different influences and
Yeah, it's
still be relative to other bands in the genre.
yeah, it's almost like some sort of traditional folk music or something like that, you know, that can actually incorporate any culture into it easily. You
Yeah.
know, it's yeah, it's neat. Yeah, super cool.
So I want to thank you,
Yeah, thank you.
Jason. I
Sorry
had a
for talking your
blast.
ear off there.
No, I'm so glad this interview went so well, and I'm so happy and thankful that you gave me another shot at it, because I really enjoyed talking to you, and I have a feeling we're gonna chat a lot in the future. I just have that feeling. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah, maybe
feel
we'll get to play.
that would be great. I love it.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah, maybe
awesome.
maybe we could record something and send some files or something.
Absolutely. Yeah, anytime. There's the collaboration.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah, sounds
Awesome.
good.
Well, thank you so much, Jason, and you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thanks, Ryan. We'll see you later. Thanks, everybody.